All right, Shane Beamer gets his guy as South Carolina is finalizing a deal to make Kendal Briles their next offensive coordinator. We talk about what the hire means, what we like and what we don't like, and what this domino piece could mean for the rest of the offseason as well. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in America. We appreciate you for helping us get there. Got a good show for you today. As South Carolina hasn't become official yet, but according to reports from Pete Thamel from ESPN, South Carolina is in the middle of finalizing a deal to make Kendal Briles their next offensive coordinator for the 2026 season and beyond. We'll get to all of that. Plus, reports that Clayton White might be being targeted as the potential defensive coordinator for Tennessee, since that job came open today as well. We'll get to all of it here in due time. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, guys, free and available podcasts wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So we had a pretty in-depth breakdown of all things Kendal Briles yesterday on the podcast. It was a pretty good episode. A lot of stats. You guys know I love a deep dive, and we got into all of those things late Monday night or late Sunday night, early Monday morning. We are recording this late into the night on Monday because the news just came out, waited all day for it. And like I said, Pete Thamel's about as good of a source as you could trust. So I feel confident that they are going to finalize this. We heard from as early as last week that South Carolina was hoping to finalize a deal, hopefully with Briles, by the beginning of this current week. And if not, they were going to continue to look elsewhere and continue to do their due diligence and by all means take this coaching search as serious as they need to, because it is not life or death, but it is job or no job for Shane Beamer. If you want an in-depth breakdown of all the Briles numbers and stuff like that, because we're not going to redo that on today's episode, we're going to get into a couple of them and really get into what we like and dislike in the opening segment. And then in the second part of the show, we will also talk a little bit about, we get some good news and immediately maybe some potential bad news, as Clayton White is on the short list for defensive coordinator potential hires at Tennessee. But the man of the hour, Kendal Briles, at TCU for the last 3 years, obviously a very recognizable name, especially in offensive circles, I guess, around the game over the last decade or so. His dad, Art Briles, offensive guru, and we talk about coaching trees all the time. The Belichick coaching tree, the Saban coaching tree, Kirby Smart's starting to have his. But there's been in the last 10 or 15 years almost a fraternity of sorts of offensive play callers and offensive focused football coaches that have really changed the game dramatically, right? Like for a long, long time, we were not seeing offenses anywhere close to this explosive, this dynamic, diverse, and all those kind of things. And Kendal Briles has been at the epicenter of most of those over the last decade plus. When you hear that Lane Kiffin, who is one of the best offensive play callers and offensive minds in all of football, not just college football, when you hear that he is seeking out Art and Kendal Briles to get an understanding of what their offense does and to take bits and pieces of it to use in his own offense, that's pretty high praise. And the news that he was going to potentially leave TCU, I don't think it was a huge shock, because after all, this is a better job than TCU, right? Like we all know that. More opportunities, and it's a bigger stage. Now, he's in year 3 there, and we talked about some of the stuff that we really liked about his offense. What are the main components of his offense? It is up-tempo. It is not necessarily just an air raid, even though his TCU offenses had a ton of success primarily in the passing game and not as much in the running game over the past couple of years. That's more so because the way that he stylistically approaches each individual team and offensive unit is, who are my best players? What are my strengths? Let's lean into that. Let's not do what we saw Mike Shula do for the past, first 3 quarters of the season and bang our heads against the wall and try to fit square pegs into round holes. Now, the numbers speak for themselves. And I've said this over and over. From a comparative standpoint, whoever they were going to hire was going to have a much better resume than what we were used to seeing here this season. But just to revisit some of these, okay? We know how bad South Carolina's been at trying to, well, pretty much on all things offense, except for a brief moment last year and also in 2022. You look at the last 7 years at South Carolina, their scoring offense, points per game, has ranked outside of the top 100 in 3 of those 7 years and outside of the top 70 in 5 of those. Yards per game, they finished 108th in the country this year, have finished 83rd or worse in 5 of the last 7 years as well. And then you look at yards per play. This is a big part of Kendal Briles' offense. Like you can sit here and look at stats on a page, and the yards per game is a very misleading stat in terms of judging a offense's success as a whole, because there's garbage time, there's broken tackles, like freak play, whatever. But yards per play has become a much more important metric and stat over the past couple of years. South Carolina has ranked in 77 or worse in 5 of the last 7 years. Let's get to the good stuff, okay? Where has Kendal Briles and his offenses ranked? And now he's been, I'm using the last 11 years of him as an OC. That's at Baylor, FAU, Florida State, Houston, Arkansas, and TCU. And we'll primarily focus on the Arkansas and TCU portion of that resume. But it's been significantly better than what we are used to here at South Carolina. Points per game. His offense has scored 30 points or more, 30 points per game or more in 9 of his 11 seasons as a play caller. You want to talk about what keeping the ball moving? This past season, South Carolina ranked 113th in first downs. All 3 of Briles' offenses at TCU ranked in the top 40 nationally in first downs per game. Third down, he's been great. From a total yards standpoint, I told you how much South Carolina has struggled to have any sort of prolific, even in 2024, there were games that they put up a lot of yardage, but outside of chunk plays and Lenore's being Superman, you didn't feel like you were just able to do whatever you wanted to offensively for 60 minutes and move the ball over the field. Only one time in the last 7 years has South Carolina averaged more than 400 yards per game of offense. It came in last year. Briles' offenses have averaged 400 yards or more in 10 of his 11 seasons as a play caller, and he had over 500 in half of those as well. Top 40 in the country in yards per play in 5 of the last 6 years. Top 40 in 10-yard plays or 10-yard plus plays in 9 of the last 10. That is something you're going to hear a lot about, explosives. And a lot of times we kind of deduce an explosive play, in quotes, to anything that's 20 or 30 yards or more. Briles has been very vocal. There's video of this. There's him explaining his philosophy at like coaching clinics and things like that, where the principles of what he wants to do are rooted in 5 to 7 things. And one of those is not just being able to throw the ball over the field or run the ball to the tackles or whatever you want to say. It is having the consistent ability to gain chunk plays of 10 yards or more, right? 10 yards or more. And he is ranked in the top 40 nationally in 9 of the last 10 years. He's been in the top 50 in all of those years. I don't even have to tell you where South Carolina has ranked, because it's nowhere close to that over their last 7. On third down, I went through some of the specific stats and numbers that have kind of plagued South Carolina's offense over the past several seasons, no matter who the quarterback, coordinator, or anything else was. Third down has been a massive struggle for this team. They finished 127th in the country this year. They have finished 100th or worse in 4 of the last 7 years. And they've only finished inside the top 70 in the FBS once in the last 7 years, right? It has been a massive struggle on third downs for South Carolina for quite some time. This is where he thrives. And 45.7% on third downs over his last 4 seasons between TCU and Arkansas. that is night and day different than what we are used to here. He has been top 40 in third downs over the last 4 years and top 25 in 3 of the last 4. I would just take one of those. After all the things I just, you know, spat out at you, I would take one of those, and I feel like it would have been a significantly different and noticeably different offense than what we saw here this year. Having someone that has the ability to do all of those things, and again, like the resume, it's not just one place, it's not just one league, it is all over. It's G5, it's Power 4, it's multiple stops in multiple Power 4 conferences, like Florida State, Houston, Baylor. There's no anomaly, or it wasn't like he played in like the early 2010s Pac-12 or something like that, right? Like where you're just playing basically two-hand touch, no defense. He has been successful with this offense, multiple stops across different places, and it's just proven. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's proven. So what can we expect right away? Man, I think the first thing you want to do is figure out who on the current roster is someone that would fit his scheme. Now, there's a couple of hires that still have to be made for South Carolina, and this was the first one. Remember, you still have a running backs coach you got to hire, still have an offensive line coach you got to hire. Now, maybe they stay in-house with the offensive line coach with Elliott. Maybe he shifts back over to tight ends. But the running backs coach, there's been rumors that they've tried to target the Penn State running backs coach, has an incredible track record, coaching some of the biggest names in college and the NFL. It would be a great hire. But one of the reasons they've held off on that is we're not sure what Matt Campbell's going to do at Penn State in terms of retaining him as a staff member or not. But more importantly, when South Carolina started searching for this hire, one of the things that they included and we're going to allow for the prospective hire is that they would have a say in the decision of some of these position coaches. I'm fine with that. Again, these are 3 position coaches, or 2 position coaches and a coordinator that have been 2 of the most disappointing, and there's just been no progress. Not only have they been disappointing, but there's been no progress, and it's not for a lack of talent. So having someone outside of the building that you're putting enough trust into to run the entire offense and fix this massive issue, I have no issues with having them having any input on who they should hire next. Now, there's a lot to like about Briles. There's way more to like than to dislike. But we are going to get into some of the struggles so we know what to expect. And we'll get into that in the second part of the show here right after the break. Before we go to break, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Omaha Steaks. And listen, guys, the holidays, they come with 2 big goals every single year. That is feeding people well and finding gifts that they will actually love. And if you want to accomplish both of those things in one move, you got to head to Omaha Steaks. It is the only way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door. Right now, in the month of December, I think we're recording this on December 8th or 9th. They are in the middle of their Sizzle All the Way sale where you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. And it gets even better. Locked On College listeners of this show or any other Locked On show get an extra $35 off with the code COLLEGE at checkout. I tell you what, if you've ever received socks for Christmas, it's the worst. Ever received a ribeye or filet mignon for Christmas? Much better. You can't wear them on your feet. That'd be crazy. But a much better gift nonetheless to receive and to give. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Remember, terms apply, but see site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code COLLEGE. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right. Listen, I don't feel like I'm being a homer or blindly loyal or what, like a sunshine pumper when I say this is a really, really good hire. I don't want to like not embellish, but I don't want to sit here and be over the top and say it's a home run hire necessarily, like we did. Actually, I think I put that as the thumbnail yesterday. So let me retract that statement. Maybe it is okay to say that. I have my concerns and worries, but most of those worries are that it's going to work because there's been 3 different guys that have called plays here under Shane Beamer. And outside of the 6 games in 2024, there have been a lot of failures and a lot of frustrations for each week. And here's the biggest thing too is it's just the lack of creativity and the lack of production when you have had some of your best players like having flashes of a good offense with Spencer Rattler, an NFL quarterback, and then also Xavier Legette. It's just it feels like it puts a damper on what could have been a much more fun season and players that you would remember for a long time that wore the garnet and black. Now, I think no matter what, they could have hired a literal Omaha steak to call plays, and they don't have thumbs or hands. I don't know how they would even do it, but it would have been an upgrade from Mike Shula. With Briles comes a lot to like. It doesn't seem like there's also been too many examples in any of the stops he's made where it's taken some getting used to, where it's like, well, year one with a new coordinator, new play caller, had to learn the system. It took guys a little bit longer. It's so complex. It is a simplified offense that works like almost primarily out of a focus of how do we make reads and decisions as simple as possible for our quarterback, and how do we take out some of the things that make you go 1 step forward and 2 step back before the play even happens, right? Like limit as many potential setbacks, which is something South Carolina has not done a good job of at all this past 2 seasons. How do you limit those types of things and just let them go out and play free? It is hurry up and very up tempo. I said this yesterday. They only use 1 ball. Like it is a very coordinated and orchestrated thing that involves not just the players, but the offensive line, the center, especially even the ball boys are like very, very much a part of the what's the best way to phrase this? The carrying out of what they're trying to do. There are some things of his offenses that haven't been great, and not just in 1 year or 2 years, but where he has really struggled. Briles has been great at getting a lot of explosive plays, a lot of first downs, moving the chains, tons of yardage, especially between the 20s. Where he has struggled the most and his teams have struggled the most is in the red zone. And that is a familiar thing to South Carolina fans. And it's something you don't want to see once again next year with another new play caller. Now, the numbers for Briles and his teams in the red zone, you talk about just red zone scoring, they have ranked, they were 100th this year. They were 13th last year, but they were 100th this year. They were 124th his first year at TCU. When he was at Arkansas, they were great. He finished 70th, 27th, and 15th. Those are all fantastic numbers. But when you talk about touchdowns in the red zone, at TCU, 86th and 83rd in 2 of the 3 years he's been there. And then at Arkansas, he was in the top 50 all 3 years. You compare that with South Carolina, it's actually pretty surprising because as bad as this offense has been and how much they've struggled this year, especially, they were, I think, 93rd in the country, but they've had some top 30 red zone touchdown offenses as well. I don't think you're going to take a step back anywhere on this side of the ball with a new coordinator. Part of that is just because we saw how bad it was all season long. I don't think there's going to be any part of the things that you're already not doing well that are going to somehow get worse. I don't think the run game is going to get worse. I don't think the offensive line is going to somehow be worse. I said that last year, but ended up being a mistake. I don't think any part of this current roster, offense, or 11 starters that go out there and execute the plays or try to this season, I don't think you're going to get worse in any of those areas at all. You can't get much worse in a lot of them. But there are some things that you cannot afford to next year be a thorn in your side, and scoring in the red zone is one of them. Now, I will tell you that the reason why this year's team struggled so much with that was the lack of creativity in play calling and the complete inability to just do the most simple thing, which is give Lenore Sellers the ball close to the goal line. One of the main components with Briles offenses is a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of window dressing, a lot of different formations. I can't wait to see him. I can't wait to see him. What I am praying happens when they get inside the 5-yard line is you're not seeing a ton of crazy formations when you could probably just run the football over the goal line. Like there's something to be said for offensive creativity, but there's also something to be said when it's inside the 3-5 yard line, right? Goal to go, being able to line up and feel like you can run the football and score without having to get too gimmicky, too creative, and show a wrinkle of your offense that you probably don't want on tape for the remainder of the year if you have to use it again. You know what I mean? So let me tell you a perfect example of this. Remember the Alabama game when they got down near the goal line and you would assume they would just run the football, but they had all these different like gimmicky plays with Jeremy Bernard, the receiver. That's great because it worked and it scored. But as you've seen the rest of their season, that's not something that you can necessarily replicate over and over and over again. Running the football should be something this offense does better next year. And I'm just hoping when they get down near the goal line, we're not going to see the same crap we saw this year. That's all. One of the other concerns from that's just been a consistent thing, especially at TCU, mainly at TCU, with Briles and his offense is turnovers. And a lot of times that is a luck thing. It's hard to replicate that year over year. But for whatever reason, it has plagued TCU all 3 years he's been there. They have finished near the bottom of the Big 12 in all 3 years. I think they were 10th or worse, and they were 13th in 1 year and 15th this past season as well. In 3 years, this teams have had 60 total turnovers, averaging 20 per season. Now at Arkansas, it wasn't as bad. At Arkansas, they had 42 total in his 3 years there, and twice they were in the top 5 of the SEC for fewest turnovers in a season. Now, I think one of those was even they had the fewest overall with 11 in 2021. So maybe it's just something in the water in Fort Worth and something like that, but it has been for 3 straight years something they have not seemed to be able to correct in any of his offenses. There's still way more here to like than to dislike, and that would be my firmest stance on this hire. I cannot wait to see pen go to paper because I just want this to go through so we can move on to the next thing. And the next thing for this staff and Beamer and also Briles is figuring out who is going to fill out the rest of this staff with the running backs coach and the offensive line coach. And then you got to start working on retaining the players you want to stay on this roster for next year. Once that is done, it is time to hit the ground running and start building this team for next year. And listen, I wasn't excited for Mike Shula. I understood why they made him the guy, but I'm excited for Kendal Briles because this is a guy that is heavily sought after and has been multiple times in his career. And as I've said 1,000 times already, the track record speaks for itself. So hopefully tomorrow we will have the official pen to paper, and Kendal Briles will then be a Gamecock staff member, and we can put the long national Mike Shula nightmare behind us. But as of tonight, it is on the 1-inch line. Okay. Wish I didn't use that analogy considering the issues we just talked about at the goal line for South Carolina this season. But according to Pete Thamel, this will get done hopefully in the next 24 hours as they finalize the details. We're going to come back for one more segment, talk about the other coordinator on the current South Carolina staff, and his name, Clayton White, popping up in a couple of hot boards for the Tennessee defensive coordinator job. We'll talk about that right after this. All right, guys. Before we get into our last segment of the day, I do want to say thank you again for making Locked On your first listen each and every day. Thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network as well. You already live for your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad free by joining the Everydayer Club today. And you can get Locked On Gamecocks with no interruptions, members only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Make sure you check out the Everydayer Club for Locked On Gamecocks for exclusive access without any interruptions. Now, also want to tell you one more time about our friends at Game Time and some exciting news that we talked a little bit about yesterday. I'm excited about it, even though it's not my favorite sport. The World Cup is officially coming back to the United States of America in 2026. U.S. is the home country for the World Cup for the first time since 1994. USA has already announced their first two games. They're going to be out on the West Coast. The first one will be in L.A. Against Paraguay, and the second will be against Australia in Seattle. Now, if you are trying to get out there and go see that game, I can't help you with flights. I missed one yesterday. So that is not my cup of tea. But what I can help you with is tickets, and so can Game Time. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands, and it makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. In just 2 to 3 easy steps, right? You can see exactly what the view from your seats will be before you ever step foot in the stadium. They have the best customer service team and also policies of any ticketing app and agency on the web. It is awesome. I could not recommend it more. Every time I have made a big ticket purchase, especially for South Carolina games, whether it be basketball or football, I have always used the Game Time app, and I urge you to do the same. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, download the app, make an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Game Time. All right, let's close out today's show with I don't know how big of a threat it is, but I do know that it popped up on my screen, and it's something we talk about because we talk about all things South Carolina sports. Clayton White, his name has surfaced as a potential hot board candidate to replace to become the new defensive coordinator at Tennessee. Now, his name was included with several other coaches. I did not read anything, and there were no reports as of now that have said he's the favorite to take that job. His name is at the top of that list or anything like that. Now, they just fired Tim Banks today, a year after giving him an extension. So Tennessee is going to have to pay a 5.7 or maybe it was a $4.7 million buyout to their defensive coordinator a year after giving him a raise. What that tells me is two things. They were willing to pay him $2.15 million, and they're willing to pay him five more to go. Clayton White is making $1.9 million right now. He's one of the highest paid coordinators in the country. And that is not a bridge too far from a contract or financial commitment standpoint that Tennessee wouldn't take. I think that what Josh Heupel is trying to do in the immediate now for that program, especially after what happened in the playoff last year, especially with the offseason they had and all the turmoil with Nico and all that drama, and then especially going into this season where you had a tremendous drop-off from one side of the ball to the other. Just a tremendous – that was a team that probably could have found their way at least close to the playoff if they had any semblance of a defense. Remember, like they had Georgia beat early on in that game at the start of the year, but they ended up losing in double overtime, giving up 44 points. Now, the other names on that list, and again, this is on 3. Travaris Robinson, the Georgia co-defensive coordinator, who was at Alabama for 2 seasons prior to that. Ryan Walters, the Washington defensive coordinator. He was the co-defensive coordinator at Missouri when Heupel was on staff. So that's the connection there. Chris Hampton, the Oregon defensive coordinator. I believe he's the co-defensive coordinator because Tosh Lapoy is actually the main defensive coach for the Ducks and is taking the what do you call it job, the Cal job. Jay Bateman, Texas A&M, Clayton White, like I said. Then Jim Knowles is listed from Penn State, who is the highest paid coordinator, making $3.2 million at Penn State. A year ago, he was at Ohio State. Tony White from Florida State. That will be interesting if that was made because that would turn Tennessee into basically a G5 team because they would be running Heupel's kind of gimmicky offense and then a 3-3-5 defense. We'll see. And then the other one's Corey Batoon, Missouri's defensive coordinator. My gut feeling on this is this. I haven't heard anything about Clayton White wanting to leave South Carolina. I don't know if he has aspirations of being a head coach. I do know his name has been floated around in those job openings as well at the G5 level. I don't think that you leave South Carolina for a lateral move. And it's not like he's not making good money now. Not just good money, but like top tier money in terms of the market for what SEC and Power 4 coordinators are making. Most of the people on this list, again, they fired Tim Banks today. Most of the people on this list, it feels way more that Tennessee is going to swing for the fences. And so they just compiled a list of some of the biggest names they think are remotely attainable. Or they are going to stay within the conference and try to win part of the offseason by making their team better while making one of their conference opponents worse. I don't know enough about any of the info on this because like at the time of recording this, I think Tim Banks was fired less than 14 hours ago. We will monitor it, obviously, as it goes on. But it is something that's interesting because right when you get Kendal Briles and that announcement almost being finalized, you were probably hoping you had like some stability and you at least want to know what your staff is going to be so you're not having to start all over to fill out a massive role on that staff right as you get into the transfer portal, right as you get into the offseason and spring ball and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully Clayton White doesn't go. I think Clayton White is the most overlooked and maybe underrated defensive coordinator in the entire country. But I'm hoping that he stays one more season at least in South Carolina. That is all for today's episode. I appreciate you guys. Remember, sign up for all the things that we brought up earlier. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow. And until next time, go Cox.